PhD, and I've been working in the fields of youth prevention, youth development, youth mentoring, youth empowerment, mental health, etc. for over 20 years, and I was fortunate enough to be part of developing this Healthy Transitions curriculum, which we just are so excited about. And I do a lot of programming specific to youth in foster care or youth exiting foster care. So it was a great treat for me to be part of this project. And we'll be telling you more about it as we go, but I want to just quickly introduce my co-trainer extraordinaire, who's Jerry Shirk, and he'll tell you a little bit about himself as well. Jerry? You might have to push *6 on your phone. Do we have a Jerry?
Okay, there we go.
Yay!
We go. Yay, thank you. My name is Jerry Shirk, and I live near the San Diego area. Dusty Ann and I have actually been writing curriculum and training together for almost 20 years now. And I have a background in counseling and basically help mentoring programs across California and the nation. And Dusty Ann and I had a great time creating this curriculum, and I'm really happy to be on the call today with you all.
Hey, thanks, Jer. All right. Carrie, was there more technical housekeeping orientation stuff that we need to do before we jump into the content?
No, please go right ahead.
Okay, great. Then, we did want to ask one just quick question just to understand how to best help you all. So there's a feedback tool in the bottom left of your screen, and the question is anyone on the call already implementing the curriculum, or are most of you hearing about this for the first time? So if you're hearing about this for the first time, please click the yes box that you're hearing about this curriculum for the first time down in the feedback tool down at the bottom on the left. Are folks finding that tool? And if you're not hearing it for the first time, it says feedback on the left in the column, and there's a yes and a no answer. So if you're hearing about this for the first time, click yes. If you've heard about it before, click no. Are folks having an okay time finding that? You can also use the chat box and just say, have you used it before or for the first time? A couple people haven't seen the button. I don't know, Carrie, if it's highlighted for everybody. I can see it. But okay, so let's just use the chat if you're hearing about this for the first time. Okay, so most of you it's for the first time. Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so let's move along then. Just a couple of acknowledgments to get us started. The Foundation for the California Community Colleges and California Mental Health Services Act money and oversight and supervision are what made this curriculum possible. So we really want to thank both of those entities for that. And from the foundation, we actually have Colleen Ammerman here on the line with us. You'll hear from her in just a few minutes. Welcome, Colleen, and thanks for joining us. And we really want to thank Colleen and her staff, Carmen and Christina, for all their work making this happen. This curriculum came about in part because a lot of the site coordinators at a lot of the community colleges who were doing ILP programs with foster youth at community colleges really felt that mental health and wellness and some of those topics were something that should be added to the curriculum and taught as a life skill. So that was sort of where the impetus came, and then Colleen came to me and said, do you think we can develop this? And we were able to go to the funder and bring this about. And several of those site coordinators then became a working group to help us actually develop the curriculum. So we really want to appreciate that working group for making sure that this curriculum would be accessible and effective in those settings. And then we also did some focus groups with foster care youth who were at some of these sites to get their input on what kind of material they'd like to see, and that was really helpful. So we really appreciate the youth who contributed that way, and they definitely indicated that this was an important topic and something that they'd like to explore. They also indicated that it's a bit of a scary topic and very personal, and they have a lot of concerns about how it would be delivered. So that really helped us think about how to make this a safe and accessible sort of a thing for the youth. We also want to thank Hayward Bracey, who did the PowerPoint design. And you're going to get a real treat opportunity a little later to hear from Sherry Schroeder, who's from one of the program sites, and is going to tell us a little bit more about how it's gone delivering the curriculum at her site. And she also provided some great photos for us to use in the presentation. So we really appreciate Sherry for that. I'm not sure if she's on the call yet, but we'll hear from her later. And then we really want to thank Amy Springmeyer and Carrie DeSalle from the Student Mental Health Program and from CART for helping put today's presentation together. So thanks to all those folks. And of course, Jerry, my co-trainer here. And actually, there was a couple other authors that contributed to the curriculum. Sarah Kremer is an art therapist and also a youth mentoring provider, and she provided a lot of activities and materials. And my assistant, Andrea Barrera, was instrumental in pulling all of these materials together. So we really want to thank those folks as well. All right, so our learning objectives for today, just so you understand what we're here for, is to talk a little bit about the importance of mental health, self-care, and wellness for transitioning foster care youth, and the corresponding need to support these as critical life skills. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. One of the main goals is just to help you be a little bit familiar with the curricula. They are available for free online, and they can be used in a variety of formats and settings, and so we want to just provide some familiarity with them and think about the ways that they might be utilized. We also want to hear a little bit, like I said, about some of the positive and challenging experiences that the programs that piloted this curriculum have encountered, so that you can maybe learn a little bit from their experience. We'll take a minute just to talk about some resources and supports that may be available to providers who are interested in utilizing materials. So that's what we hope to accomplish today. Also at the end, and this is probably most important, I should have said this, we're going to, we've scheduled 90 minutes for this call. We probably don't have 90 full minutes of material because we really wanted to leave some space at the end just for your questions, and any of you who are thinking about implementing the curriculum might have things you want to talk about. So we left some space for that as well, which takes us to our agenda. So we're going to start with an overview and what the curriculum is about. Then we'll talk about how you might design the courses. There's a basic course and a supplemental course that you can think about designing. There's also a peer-to-peer group that we've given you materials to operate, and we'll talk about that. And we've also provided a coordinator toolkit, which is a whole wealth of resources for coordinators who might be implementing this curriculum, not just resources to implement the curriculum, but additional mental health resources in case needed. Then we'll get to hear from our guest presenter, who is Sherry from Woodland Community College, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So that's our plan for today. So just to dive into an overview, so I just wanted to say a few words about why we did this curriculum and what we hope it will accomplish and what it can do and what it can't do. And then right after that, we're going to hear from Colleen from the Foundation, who will hopefully have some things to add to this as well. So what I wanted to say is that the curriculum is aiming to support successful transitions. And I know that lots of ILP classes are aiming at that, and this is trying to sort of fill a gap or a hole where, we might teach and train young people to how to find a place to live, how to stay in school, some of those things. But if they're not feeling well, and if they're not feeling whole, and if they don't know where to go with their more personal problems, they're unlikely to be successful, in some of the other things that we're hoping will happen for them. So the idea here is to really treat, is to address all aspects of health and wellness, not any one thing. So sort of a body, mind, spirit kind of approach to overall wellness and health. And we address several aspects of health and wellness, so not just physical, but emotional and mental and spiritual, et cetera. The training is set to offer, it's to be training and also peer support as opposed to actually treatment, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But again, the idea here is that wellness is a key set of life skills. So just like we teach you to how to live independently or how to stay in school or those kind of things. We also want to teach wellness as a key set of life skills. And I just wanted to say a couple of words about that. One of the reasons that we treat it as a life skill is, for one thing, just because we think that it is an important life skill, that these are things that young people learn as they become adults, is how to take care of themselves, how to make sure that they are feeling whole and well, and what are the strategies and skills to do that. So we see this as something that everyone must learn, and treating it that way helps us to reduce some of the pathologizing that can happen of foster youth, and the fact that there can be an over-focus sometimes with foster youth on mental illness as opposed to on mental health. And so the idea here is to really focus on health, and not just mental health, but all kinds of health as interconnected, and to kind of get away from the idea that these are problem children who are not okay, and get them more into the idea that these are just healthy skills that we all need to learn, and that they should learn them too, sort of that along those lines, so that these are normal parts of life and that these are common to people from all walks of life. So that's some of the intention that I just wanted to make clear here. As I say here in this fifth bullet, this is not intended to be treatment, but you can certainly identify treatment needs and help refer. And again, what we're offering instead is training and materials and supplies, and also peer support. And that's a really important part of things, is that the curriculum offers a chance to really help create healthy community between the foster youth in your program, among the foster youth in your program, so that they can support each other. It also has a very youth-driven and interactive format. So essentially, some of our goals here are that many of the students that you, as you know, are working with have been on the receiving end of services for many years, and they've not often been treated as individuals with something to teach or something to share. So the approach here supports self-esteem and supports leadership development by using a very youth-driven format, and you have options about how youth-driven it is, but we designed it to make that possible. And also, like I said, to promote that peer support. So not only does that support self-esteem and support leadership development and some of those really important things, it also provides for some stability and some connectedness by actually connecting you to each other, and hopefully those connections can continue into adulthood. Okay? Our audience today, from what I understand, looking at the chat box, looks like it's mostly folks from colleges that haven't used the curriculum yet, which is great. We also advertise to county mental health providers. I don't know if we had anybody. I was trying to look down the chat. Feel free to type in the chat if you're a county mental health provider, even if you already did, just because I might have missed it. And part of the hope is that within each county, the mental health providers and the campus personnel can try to partner and try to use these curricula as effectively as possible. So that's some of the overview thoughts I had to say, and at that point, I'd love to turn it over to Colleen from the Foundation, who has a few words she'd like to say about the curriculum and about our purpose today, and just welcoming you all. So Colleen, are you unmuted and available to speak?
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, when you push *6 and then push it again and push it again, you're never quite sure which stage of *6 you're at. So I welcome everyone. It's nice to see a diverse group of people on the phone from the colleges, from different departments who obviously have interest in the student population. This particular piece, which is our Healthy Transitions, is part of our larger California Community College Student Mental Health Grant. And Dusty-Ann, you did a great job giving an overview of how it came to be. CalMHSA, the California Mental Health Services Authority, at about year 2.5 of our larger student mental health grant, came to us and said, we'd really like you to identify gaps in what you're able to provide based on your current. And because I and my other teammates work on a direct service foster youth services program referred to as the YES ILP program, and also we work very closely with the Foster Youth Success Initiative through the Chancellor's Office, said, you know, what we hear is that ILP is great, so teaching independent living skills is wonderful, but so many of the students aren't able to really matriculate through their ILP experience or even into college, because once they leave the system, they just don't have any ways to address their wellness and their mental health needs. And so that's how this came to be. We were able to put in an application and get some supplemental funding. And what we were hoping was that we could develop a sustainable tool that colleges with some training infrastructure could implement. And so that was sort of the overarching goal, and counties. So really for counties, our county partners, any youth-serving partner in California or really across the country, we wanted them to have a tool that was diverse enough and very user-friendly, such that anyone who had capacity to do training or anyone who had capacity to support a peer-to-peer support group where youth came together and supported each other in these ways, that the tools and the resources would be there for that to happen. So the CalMHSA funding, while it's really only one-time funding, we wanted to create some materials that would have shelf life beyond the term of the grant. I was very excited about the process that we employed to get this developed, and including the youth input and the campus input. So we did focus groups with over 200 youth across the state. We wanted it to be designed with all of their thoughts and feelings involved in the design, and colleges in terms of the practicality of using training curricula on this very sensitive subject. The one caveat, and I think most people know this, but the one caveat I say when I'm talking about this curricula and I'm distributing it or promoting it is that when you're using the curricula, it's important to make sure that you have the back-end referral processes in place. And Dusty, and you may get to this during the PowerPoint, so hopefully I'm not saying something, but I always feel really compelled to say, you know, wellness and mental health is a super sensitive subject area, and for a lot of these young adults, either in care or coming out of care, they don't necessarily have a full support network of folks. So when you bring up this subject and you delve into this subject area, it's just really, really important to make sure that you have appropriate referral resources. So if a kid really does sort of open up and start to explore beyond the capacity of the trainers, that you have the right counselors or you have a referral to the county to make sure that that kid isn't left feeling real vulnerable and you know, just in need of more support than maybe what a trainer can provide. So I think that's really all I wanted to say. I'm really, really pleased to have been part of the development of this curriculum. We want people to use it, and I'm really glad for the whole team that was able to contribute to it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. Those are great, great words of insight and wisdom from someone who's been really involved with seeing all the sites do this and was involved from the original piece of the vision, and I just really support everything Colleen just said, so thank you so much. Wonderful. All right, and yes, we will touch on some of the issues she brought up again, but it's always great to have just a re-emphasis that some of these things have turned out to be really important. So thanks for that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just actually dive into what some of the materials are. First of all, down here, let me get my little pointer. There we go. This is the link down here. I also put it in your chat box to the actual materials. Depending on how good you are at multitasking, you're welcome to have the trainer guide. So if you were to click on this link, you'll see the page that has all the Healthy Transitions materials. It has youth workbooks and trainer guides, etc. And this presentation does kind of follow the trainer guide. Carrie just put it in the chat box again. So feel free to also have that open in front of you or on your screen if helpful. You don't need it. Everything you need is in the slides, but just if you'd like to use this as an opportunity to kind of get familiar with the trainer guide, feel free. And the trainer guide is really sort of your Bible for this program if you decide to implement it. It tells you everything you need to know about how to do that. So So let me just dive into what the components of the curriculum are. Basically, what we developed is a 12-hour basic curriculum, a 9-hour supplemental curriculum, a manual for doing an ongoing peer-to-peer support group, a student resource guide, and a coordinator toolkit. So those are the 5 sort of documents that come with the curriculum. There's actually more that comes with it than that, but we'll get to that in just a second. These are the 5 main things. And again, people have been delivering this in different ways, which I'll get to in just a minute. But these are the pieces that we've created. And I wanted to say a couple of words about that. So these components, these 5 components, are intended to all work together in the following way. So the basic and supplemental curricula both have customizable student syllabi. So we have, like in the trainer guide, there's these syllabi so that you can decide how you want to deliver them. And then it actually comes with the actual presentation slides that you can use if you decide to do the curriculum. There's also a youth workbook for both the basic and the supplemental curriculum. And then, of course, the trainer guide for each. The trainer guide addresses both of those. The peer-to-peer manual, which Jerry's going to tell you about in more detail later, has trainer instructions and the full inventory of materials and activities that you can use to develop your own content and flow for the peer-to-peer group. So it doesn't have as structured of a curriculum, but it has everything you would need in it, both instructions and materials to do a group like that. And then we have this other piece called the Student Resource Guide, which basically was that we were finding all these great handouts and information sheets and worksheets and all kinds of good stuff that were existing out there in the field and that we were able to get permission to use. And they support these materials support a lot of the activities in the youth workbooks and in the presentation slides and in the curricula you might run. And it's a very thick document with a lot of materials in it. So we decided to make it its own sort of thing that you can use in a variety of ways. You can either have 5 or 6 of them printed out in binders that you have available so that, let's say you're doing an activity and the activity wants the kids to learn about how trauma has affected their development. You have some slides in the curriculum for that, but then in the student resource guide, there's a whole bunch of handouts and materials about that too. And so you could break the kids into groups of 5 or 6, let's say, and they could each work with a student resource guide. Or if you actually had the resources and felt like it was useful, you could give each youth a resource guide that they could actually take with them and have all those resources and materials with them. But we thought that might be a little bit beyond what they're going to actually carry around with them. So there's lots of ways to use the student resource guide, but it's just a wealth of informational sheets and handouts and materials that can support everything you're doing. And then finally, there's a coordinator toolkit, as I mentioned, which it provides tips and strategies for working with youth in relation to their physical and mental health needs. It has materials that support effective local referrals and partnerships to better meet the youth in your program. So think of it as an additional toolkit of materials that if you're delivering this curriculum and you're running into issues or problems, or you're wondering how to be sensitive about something, things like that, you'll find a lot of that information in the toolkit, okay? And I just wanted to make a note that in addition to the original materials that we developed specifically for this curriculum, we thought to ourselves, there's a lot of great materials out there. Why reinvent the wheel? So we've also relied on a variety of external materials and curricula, meaning things that already existed from other sources, so that we can really bring students the most up-to-date, most comprehensive quality information available. And I have a slide in just a bit that will help us see what some of those external materials are. So that's kind of just an overview of what the components are. And I wanted to say a few more words about how they're put together and how they're intended to be used. So first I wanted to just say a couple of words about who can use the trainer guide, who can deliver this curriculum. We wrote the guide and the curriculum under the presumption that instructors have at least a certain level of comfort and proficiency with addressing sensitive topics with vulnerable youth. So it's recommended that instructors either have a clinical or relational expertise or that somebody with that kind of expertise can be available to consult on a regular basis. If this kind of expertise is lacking at your site and you don't feel like you are prepared to do this, we recommend some kind of comprehensive training of trainers, and that is something that we are available to provide. We'd have to work out the resources for it, and we have a few words to say about that later. But we really want to emphasize that somebody who's not that familiar with this population, or maybe has taught things like financial literacy or housing stuff and just doesn't feel that comfortable getting into this real touchy-feely, ticky-tacky kind of stuff, should really think twice before just diving into this curriculum. So that's really important. As we've said, it's a sensitive set of topics. So that was one word I wanted to say about who should facilitate. The trainer guide, a couple quick words about that. The guide is to assist the coordinators in effectively utilizing the materials. It offers guidance and tips about how to best deliver the content and effectively facilitate groups. What we did, we were really trying to sort of hedge our bets for you and make this as usable and accessible to you all as possible. And what we understand about that is that in some cases, and maybe in many cases, you all are very, very busy and implementing lots of different curricula, and having sort of a standard curriculum that you can, that just has everything in it, is ready to go, tells you exactly what to do, tells you what materials you need or supplies, that kind of thing, is the easiest and the best for you. You just want somebody to hand you a canned program and say run with it. And we understood that for a lot of you that's the best thing. But for a lot of folks too, they might want to customize, or they might like the materials but not like the way that they're put together. So we really went through quite a lot of effort to both provide what we call a standard curriculum and to make everything as customizable as possible. And the guide really teaches you how to do that and helps you do that. Okay, so the standard curriculum includes talking points, instructions for exercises and activities, suggested time frames and materials for each lesson, and then we try to offer options and suggestions for customization in the guide as well. So it makes it easy for you to plan and organize, but it also allows you the customization ability. The peer-to-peer support group manual and the coordinator toolkit are more standalone booklets, although booklet doesn't totally do it justice. They're pretty substantive, fat documents, so maybe more books than booklets. And they each have their own instructions and materials. Those components are not covered in the trainer guide because they're standalone pieces. So you'll have to go to those actual documents to see how to use it, how to do the peer-to-peer support group, and to understand what's in the toolkit. But we'll talk about it a little bit today. Let's see. Okay. So as far as how the materials are packaged, everything, like I said, is available electronically on that link that we posted, so you can print things out. For the pilot, there was also printed, bound copies of the youth workbooks so that those could actually be given out to the youth and taken home. Colleen, do you want to say anything about whether hard copies are going to be available to anybody else, or whether folks are going to just need to figure that out themselves? Or
we do have a limited supply. I was just typing into the chat box. We do have a limited supply of the hard copies of the main curriculum. So if folks on the phone are interested in that, you can just send an email request. I can type my email into the chat box. So folks can request a hard copy of the main curriculum, and also another resource that we have printed in hard copy are the youth workbooks. So while you get the curriculum, whether you get a hard copy of the curriculum or you download it from the website, it is really nice to have the youth workbooks, and we have a very large supply of youth workbooks. So, and we'll gladly ship them to anyone who's interested in implementing, a part of it or all of it. We have a lot of youth workbooks. So I'll type my email address into the chat box for anyone who wants to follow up about getting a hard copy of the main curriculum and some youth workbooks.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay.
Great.
So that's a resource hopefully available to folks. Irma's asking if you get first dibs for being on the call, Colleen, so I'll let you guys work that out. So that's how the materials that we've provided.
Being on the call.
So that's how we've packaged the materials that we created. And I just wanted to say that, like we said, that we used a lot of external materials, and they're actually, when I say external, meaning they were existing from other sources, and we actually braided them into the curriculum. So you'll see places in the standard curriculum where it says, okay, now you want to use the mental health program, or excuse me, the mental health curriculum that we accessed for this. So let me take us to our next slide, which will help explain what I mean by this. So we found several resources out there that we just thought were so comprehensive and so helpful that they were worth braiding into our curriculum. So one is a book called Transitions, Student Reality Check by Dr. Stanley Kutcher, which is part of a mental health curriculum. We got a lot of materials with permission off of kidshealth.org and teenhealth.org. There was this wonderful cookbook that California Youth Connection was putting together called Recipes for Life, and we were thinking about how cooking for oneself and healthy foods and all of that is really part of self-care. And this was really fun because it was a cookbook that was developed by current and former foster youth for current and former foster youth. So it's a life skills sort of a thing. And I know that youth in the pilot program were able to actually get a copy of this. Colleen, is there an update on what we're doing with that? We can come back to that too if anyway, I do have a copy of it, so if people want to, it was in draft form, and I'm not sure if it ever was actually published by CYC, but it is available at least in draft form. And then on mentalhealthfirstaid.org, there's just a wealth of materials, and I think it's a very low cost, like $25 to get access to it, and then you can use all of their materials, and we used quite a lot of their materials in the curriculum. And then this this source called HRM Video had some nice toxic relationships handouts. So those are some of the more main external materials that we use. And if you are looking through the trainer guide, you'll see where it says, okay, here, go to mentalhealthfirstaid.org, click on this link, and use this video that they have, or use this material that they have. So we've really pulled together quite a lot for you and tried to make it as, like I say, easy to use in the standard curriculum as possible, but also as customizable as possible. And I see that Colleen got disconnected and is calling right back in. So that's great. Okay, so let's just dive in a little bit to how you might think about designing a course. And we're not going to get too far with this today because it's not a full-on training of trainers, but we just wanted to give you a sense of how you would think about doing a curriculum like this. So the first thing would be to select which components you want to do. In the pilot, some programs just did the basic curriculum. Other programs did the basic and went on to the supplemental. Some of them did the peer-to-peer support group. But there's the option of doing it any way you want. You could do just the basic. You could do just the peer-to-peer. So your first step would be to decide which components you're going to do and sort of in what order. And you'll hear from one of the sites later, but one thing I wanted to say about that is that some programs did weekly sessions, and that is how it's designed. You'll see in just a minute. They're designed in 90-minute sessions, I should say, although each 90-minute session actually has two parts to it, so you could even do 45-minute sessions. So weekly is fine. Other programs did like a weekend-long retreat. So they did a weekend with the basic and then a weekend with the supplemental, and people reported a lot of really wonderful experiences doing it that way. And then the ongoing group, you could do it for a set period of weeks where you say, okay, for the next 8 weeks, we're going to do peer-to-peer, or it can be an ongoing space that people can drop in on. You'd have to think about whether you're comfortable with people dropping in or whether you want to start with a set group of students and go that way, and Jerry will have some words to say about that. So the first step is to just think through what components you would want to do and in what order. Then of course you would want to select instructors, and we already talked a little bit about what that requires. And then you'd want to think a little bit about whether you like the standard curriculum as it is or whether you want to customize and how much you want to customize. thinking about group composition is really important for this curriculum. Like we mentioned, a lot of the youth in the focus groups were really concerned about, actually their biggest concern was how will the other students behave, and will they keep what I say confidential, will they treat me with respect, etc. So because it's so sensitive, we thought that the sessions are intended for groups of 10 to 15 youth maximum, and then it's highly recommended that even within that 10 to 15 that you break them down into smaller groups for a lot of the activities. So you may need to group students in terms of things like maturity level. You could do it by gender or some other criteria related to their specific needs so that they feel comfortable talking about really sensitive stuff. And you can mix and match, of course. Sometimes they can work as a whole class, sometimes in gender-based groups, maturity levels, etc. So you can mix and match. But consider having a consistent group makeup because it could be sort of unsafe and difficult for youth if there's different students kind of dropping in all the time. But we understand that your populations can be somewhat transient, so you may have to kind of nuance that along. So you want to be inclusive yet create a safe space however possible. So you can decide how you want to handle that, okay? And student design and facilitation. Like I mentioned earlier, some of the goals are to really promote leadership and self-initiated kind of curriculum whenever possible. And there are several ways that you can involve youth. You can involve them right from the beginning of, while you're still deciding what you want to do with the curriculum. You could involve some youth in the actual planning. You can decide that part yourself and then involve them as you go. You could have youth lead. You could have different youth lead different sections. There are certain activities that are specifically designed for youth leadership. So there's a variety of ways that you can engage youth in the planning and leadership of the curriculum. Okay. So rolling right along here. So I'm going to hand it over to Jerry now to talk a little bit about one of the things that we did in the standard curriculum, both in the basic and the supplemental, is we created some overarching or organizing frameworks, centralizing frameworks, I guess we called them. That's like a theme that the youth can come back to again and again, and it kind of helps tie all the materials together. And we had a different one for the basic curriculum than we did for the supplemental curriculum, and but we think they go together nicely. So Jerry, do you want to tell them a little bit more?
Sure. And Dusty Ann, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So as Dusty Ann was saying, we wanted to come up with a couple central frameworks, one for the standard or basic curriculum and one for the supplemental curriculum. And as we talked about several options. We came up with a tree that is neat. It's an exercise, and actually a number of exercises that we have in the curriculum that you can ask your students to consider doing. It's something that I've used for about 10 years. I've used with all kinds of groups. I've used it from every population, from 5th graders to foster youth to actually a couple times with corporations. And it's a fun and easy way for individuals to really reflect on where they are in life, their strengths and obstacles, some of the things maybe that they've already accomplished and then where they want to go. And I find that people really like it because, number one, it's about themselves, which is everybody's favorite subject. Secondly, it's organic. It's something that can grow as they grow in their thoughts and ideas about themselves. They can keep coming back to it. And thirdly, it's creative. And I can see by some of the insets in the PowerPoint, and the last couple of days is the first time I've seen these. These students that have done this exercise have done an unbelievable job of making it more creative than I can even imagine. So those pieces of artwork look really nice. But in short, it's a fun way to express who you are. And I think with populations that, and as many of us know, maybe perhaps all of us know, populations that have been traumatized, it's really good for them to express themselves. So this is really a safe way to do it. So there are instructions about how to use the Tree That Is Me. The kind of the basic, the standard way to use it is just on like a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, but as you can see, some people have blown it up into poster size and so forth. Okay, and so the next slide. So the second theme is for the supplemental curriculum, and it's something that I came across quite a few years ago. And to give you some quick background, I'm a former NFL football player, and I went back to school after retirement to study psychology and to actually study the transition of athletes, the transition of football players, because we're hearing a lot about it now. There's a lot of divorce, bankruptcy, permanent injuries, job changes, and now brain injuries. But when I was studying it, I found it was good for all populations, not just football players. In fact, I started working in the school system, running my own group mentoring programs, and I found that young people really like looking at the hero's journey, and they also like working with a goal-setting model I was able to create called the CHAMP model. And CHAMP is based on an acronym. C is your challenge, or your call to excellence, or your goal. H is your hurdles. A is achievement, the visualization of what you're going for. M is for mentors, people that can help you get there. And then P is for plan. But I think it's a fun model. I really enjoyed reading some notes from some of the programs a couple days ago that said that they were using the hero's journey and finding it very impactful for their students. So we have a lot of possibilities about how to use it. One is looking at the actual hero's journeys. It's actually based on Joseph Campbell's work in mythology and the guideposts that people take to get through life. And then the CHAMP model is really based on that mythological model. And so I will turn it back over to Dusty Ann.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Yeah, and so each of these frameworks, there's like a whole variety of activities in the curricula that take the kids back to this. So there's little meditations and there's art activities like you saw with these beautiful trees, which I agree are just amazing to look at. So yeah, Jerry made us some great contributions to the curriculum by putting those together for us. So we'll move on with a little bit more information about the curriculum here. And we want to get to our guests as soon as possible, so I just have a little bit more to say. So one of the things that we noticed when putting this together is that when we think about sites deciding whether they want to use the standard curriculum or whether they want to customize, and if they are using the standard curriculum, then for sure is there was a logic underlying sort of how we put it together in the way that we did that we thought was, well, logical, but also sort of safe, and also just sort of a nice way to get folks into the materials that we're talking about here. And we thought that it was important for people to understand this structure, whether or not you decide to use the standard setup that we have or whether you want to customize. So the basic curriculum is 8 sessions, each are 90 minutes. It's mainly instructor-driven as opposed to youth-driven, although you could always make it more youth-driven if you wanted. It's a broad introduction and survey of topics, and it starts with less personal and intimate topics, moving toward more personal sharing, ending with these sort of 5 steps to wellness that we sort of created as an overarching kind of set of steps that they could take. So it goes into depth, but it only goes into so much depth, and we thought that was important, both just in them getting their minds and hearts around the material, and also not asking them to open up too quickly about the personal stuff, and at least not any quicker than they're ready to. Then the supplemental curriculum can get into some of the more advanced stuff. So this one is 9 hours long in total. So it has 6 90-minute sessions. I'm sorry, it has 5 sessions that are 90 minutes each. Is that right? Yeah. so this one is more student-driven. It's focused a little bit more on individual and collective empowerment, so it gets more into the leadership stuff and what does empowerment look like. It goes into greater depth. It's more advanced, and it still eases into the intimacy a little more slowly, but it does become personal a little bit more quickly than the basic does. Again, you can moderate or customize any of this. And then the peer-to-peer support group, which we usually sort of imagine would come after the other two, although, like I said, you could run them in different ways. You decide how long, how frequent the meetings. You decide how long the sessions are, but we designed it as 1-hour sessions for 8 to 10 weeks. It's entirely customizable and customized and as youth-driven as possible. It has unlimited ability to address in-depth topics as student interest and time allows. And it has a process to develop personal connections and sharing. It's highly customized, but personal sharing is likely from the start. So this is where it's kind of designed from the beginning to kind of get into some of the personal stuff. Okay? So just wanted folks to kind of understand that so that as you think about whether you're going to customize or whether you're going to use it the way we did, that you can give similar thought to these kinds of questions and issues. It's designed as paired sessions that are 90 minutes each, so it's really 45 and then a break and then 45 more, or you could do them as two separate, that's up to you. Each session has key concepts that are presented and then reinforced. They're in the slides, and there's also a student glossary. There's lots of take-it-home activities, so that if you want the ideas to be instilling healthy habits. So, for example, you might talk about stress management one day, and then there's this handy stress log that they can use, that they can take home and keep a log of how they're managing stress every day. That's just one example. Then, of course, there's the student resource guide and the transitions booklets, which are both just supplemental materials that come in handy when you're doing exercises and activities. It has lots of information that they might need for the activities or that you just might want them to have anyway. And then just to give you a sense of some of the activities that we have created, what kinds of things they are, every session has an icebreaker and lots of interactive stuff. We also, I mentioned earlier that Sarah Kremer helped us with this, and she's an art therapist. So we have several activities that involve art and creativity, kind of like those trees you saw, in self-exploration, and they actually have the expertise of an art therapist behind them. There's physical activities for fun and fitness. There's yoga and meditation and relaxation kind of stuff. There are these standard exercises, which are exercises that can be used again and again, and you can kind of go back to them. Jerry will probably give you an example or two of those when he talks about the peer-to-peer. Jigsaw puzzle activities are basically when you break the youth down into groups, and each group takes a topic, and then when they report back, you're putting the whole jigsaw puzzle back together. So there's a whole bunch of those activities and instructions for creating your own. We did lots of fun self-assessment tools and games like personality tests and that kind of stuff. Some of the feedback from the youth was that they like those kinds of games and they like learning about how their brains work and that kind of stuff, so we included a bunch of that. There's some role-playing and scenario-based activities. There's lots of Jeopardy-style games. That was a major demand from the youth and from the sites, but they love the Jeopardy games, so we included a bunch of that. And then there is space if you want to consider outside speakers. So that's some of the kinds of things that you'll find in the curriculum. I'm just going to say a couple words about this now because this would really be getting more into the TOT to get into this in too much detail. But there's some great stuff in your trainer guide about how to create safe space for this curriculum, how to initiate it, how to deal with some of the deep and personal issues that come up, when and when it's not appropriate for you as facilitator to disclose things about yourself, and how to sort of pay attention to the climate of the group. With the art therapy kind of activities, we've got a whole section on how to do these because they have you don't have to be a therapist to do these, but they do have a therapeutic intent. And so there's some tips in your trainer guide about how to do some of the creative activities in a way that focuses on process rather than product. It's not about being a great artist. It's about therapeutically sort of working with art towards your self-growth, how to talk about the artwork in a way that will support the youth instead of undermine, helping each other support creativity. this is a fun one. The importance of cleaning up is about, so we take out an art activity and we dig real deep into our psyches and into our creativity and really get in there, and then how the cleaning up process can be sort of a metaphor for, okay, I've done some work on myself, now how do I kind of put myself back together and be ready to face the real world again. So there's some real nice stuff in there along these lines that will hopefully help you. And then there's a lot of tips, like I said, about how to encourage that peer-to-peer support and a student-driven course. And we don't need to cover these in detail now, but I just wanted to point out that this is all in the trainer guide and all there for you to help you. Okay? So just really quickly, like I said, the basic curriculum has 8 sessions. And this component provides an engaging and interactive introductory survey. Like we said, it can be delivered in either of these ways. And just to give you a quick overview of what the sessions look like, so we start with daily wellness because that's not so personal. It's more about diet and getting enough sleep and health and that kind of stuff. And then we start getting into how we take care of ourselves and keep our balance and manage stress. Then we can really get into our mind and our heart, so that's a little bit more getting into mental and emotional health, and then how they might put it all together at the end. And then the supplemental curriculum allows them to set goals for furthering their journey toward wellness and revisit themes that they've already learned about, and this is what these sessions look like. So we revisit daily wellness and self-care, then we get into stress and trauma, coping and recovery, and we end with this very positive sort of empowering ourselves and the foster care community. So, and then here's some things you can use to customize the curriculum. So just knowing that the basic and supplemental can be mixed and matched in any way you like. The peer-to-peer manual, you can also use those materials if you're customizing the basic and supplemental. There's that mental health in high school curriculum. That's the mental health, that's one of the external sources. And the transitions booklet goes with that. And all of this is explained in your trainer guide, so if this is a little bit overwhelming, we're just kind of giving you a quick overview here. So these are all things that you can use to help you customize the curriculum. So I think with that, I'm ready to hand it off to Jerry, and I'm realizing that we're running a little bit behind, and I apologize for that. So Jerry will take a few minutes to tell us about the peer-to-peer, and then we'll hopefully hear from Sherry if she's on the call, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. Okay, so Jerry, you want to tell us a little bit more about peer-to-peer?
Oh, sure. Thank you. And I will move past the peer-to-peer slide. And so today we're going to cover the overview and benefits of peer-to-peer groups, the materials, design options, a few strategies for running groups, talk about icebreakers and group projects. And as we talked about earlier, the peer-to-peer groups built on the both basic and the supplemental curriculum. And really one important point of peer mentoring, probably the most important point, is that you create a safe place for young people to express themselves and to discuss issues and to get advice from others. And so the hope is that students will share their hopes and their fears, and that they'll support each other. And it's about empowerment, not only for the person getting advice, and maybe even more especially for the young person giving advice. Some of the research in mentoring shows that in cross-age peer mentoring, that being older to younger, older mentors to younger mentees, but school age, is that the mentors actually tend to get more out of it than the mentees. And of course, to build permanent connections and to have a lot of fun with the curriculum too. So the peer-to-peer manual has 6 parts, and you can see them there. The peer-to-peer model, tips and strategies for running peer groups, and there's also a lot of tips about communication skills, self-disclosure, things like this in the coordinator's toolkit. One of the huge issues, I think, in running a group, or a big issue for facilitators, is how much they disclose about themselves. So there's some really good tips in there. And of course, it's got icebreakers, exercises, and then standard exercises, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then group projects if you and the young people decide to move forward with that. So I think of peer groups in any group, really any potentially a discussion group on a continuum. And one side of the continuum is sharing. The other side is more structured, having a curriculum. So we have on this slide some of the benefits of sharing, including the intimacy allows individuals to express themselves. Of course, like we said before, they can make more permanent connections. But then handling emotions can be a challenge. Now, I noticed when people signed in, we have a lot of counselors, and it looks like a lot of job descriptions for people that have worked a lot with young people. So perhaps at your site it may not be a problem. But as Dusty Ann mentioned earlier, we strongly suggest that if you don't feel like you're, and our term is a relationship expert, is that you find support and you have somebody to talk to, especially if the sharing and the groups go deeply. So a structured curriculum provides structure in learning, and one of the drawbacks is there's less time for sharing, and then you have to do a little bit of work actually coming up with the curriculum for each meeting, although we've provided you with a wealth of curriculum. And in fact, I was preparing for this webinar, and I was looking at my materials, and I noticed in my computer I have it listed under the mother of all curriculum. So there's a lot of material here for you. As it says in the last point, a combination of both curriculum and sharing could be a good middle ground. And when I run groups, a lot of times I'll bring some curriculum to the group, but then when we start sharing, if people start to get into something that is really important to them, and I can see that they want to keep talking about it, I don't just all at once go, okay, now we're going to jump into this piece of curriculum. I'll keep talking or allowing them to talk to each other. So as the next slide says, it points out, it has suggestions for frequency of meetings. For a sharing group, you want to meet consistently. And if you meet just once a month and people are sharing something deep, and then they only come back once a month, and maybe some of the people in the group aren't there, sometimes they won't see others that they've really confided in for 2 or 3 months. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to just meet once a month. And curriculum groups with less sharing should meet at least one time a month, because you are, even if you're not doing a lot of sharing, you're developing relationships. So you need that consistency. And if sharing a curriculum group takes on a group project, it's best to meet more frequently. You'll have to look at whatever the project is and assess the number of meetings that it might take to complete that. Developing a sharing group, the facilitator needs to be comfortable with that process. Sharing group typically involves a check-in. In essence, we're taking a lot of the format, the model for group counseling, and we're kind of overlaying it here. It's not as much of a stigma as group counseling. And then the difference actually between a peer-to-peer group and group counseling is that in group counseling you usually have a counselor or facilitator which will kind of strive to keep going deeply or more deeper into each individual's issues. Here we're not attempting to do any deep therapy. Sometimes it may happen, but that's really not the goal. So a check-in format can be, I know some people call it obstacles and successes. I like to think of it as good news and bad news. Think of something good that happened since the last time we saw you and something not so good, and that allows for people to brag, and it also presents a format where the facilitator and the cohorts can actually give suggestions and support. It's good to draw on peers for solutions, and think of it as sort of yourself as a mentor. You're in the mentoring mode, so you as a facilitator are not, at least it's best for you to not come up with all the solutions. It's empowering when the peers in the group actually come up with the solutions. And sharing topics can drive the curriculum or group project. So I know in the student handbook there's a lot of topics that are very pertinent to foster youth or former foster youth. And so if you hit on some of those topics, then people come up with ideas for a project, and it can arise organically. For a sharing group, consistency is the key. So try to promote consistency and have a plan for the sharing of deep personal issues. So sometimes that might be setting limits before you get going. At other times that might be if somebody starts talking, say, specifically and graphically about some abuse that they experienced, and you think that it's too much for the group. You may have a plan ready, like I can see this is really, tell the person, I can see this is really important to you. I'd like to talk to you about this more. I think it's best if we can speak to each other immediately after the group, something like that. Developing a curriculum-based group, ask the students what they want, and then there are a great number of peer-to-peer or icebreakers in the peer-to-peer manual and exercises. See, I'm not going to read all the bullet points, trying to move ahead quickly here. And you can ask students to develop some exercises too. We did this in actually a group called Los Angeles Teen Mentoring, where we had once a month the young people, we called it Freaky Friday. We would ask them to develop their curriculum, and we would review it before they made their presentation, but they had a lot of fun with it. And of course, recruit guest speakers. Very often it could be a former foster youth who is very successful. And of course, you can look in books and search engines for exercises and projects, and maybe use some of the ones that you've used previously. We've included a design matrix. I think of developing a group as, well, I think about like a teacher's plan. And so you want to put the structure of what you're doing, and then the estimated time. And so this is just one example. You can change things around. Some people would have the educational curriculum before the small group sharing. So I know some of the groups may be 45 minutes or 50 minutes, and some maybe 90 minutes, but you can just change the matrix and the time based on that. Icebreakers and exercises. There are a lot of samples in the peer-to-peer manual, and of course when you start out, especially if the young people haven't spent a lot of time with each other, you'll want to select the icebreakers and warmers that are the get-to-know-you type of icebreakers. So Dusty Ann and I and the team have put, we've been doing this for a few years, and we've put some of our favorite icebreakers and exercises, of course, in the manual. And the exercises are found in the peer-to-peer manual. You can even go back if you've provided the basic program but skipped a couple exercises. You may want to go back and select some of those. There's a template that we use as we created the exercises and warmers. So if you're going to bring in other exercises and warmers, especially if you're having somebody else present them, we suggest that one way to do it, to standardize it, is to put the name of the exercise, the estimated time, the materials needed, instructions, and the debrief instructions. So standard exercises, one could be good news and bad news. So some programs will want to share every week. I facilitated group mentoring in the school system, middle school and high school, for years. And sometimes I would forget to do the sharing exercise, and somebody would raise their hand and say, Jerry, we forgot good news and bad news. Other groups will go, oh, gee, do we have to do this again? Jigsaw puzzle is, and I noticed in the notes from at least one of the programs that their students had a lot of fun with that. And I won't explain it now because we're running out of time. But it's just a good exercise where you can pick a theme, and then students come up with the information and they present it to each other, and they see each other's contribution as a puzzle, creates a sense of community. The third bullet point, one big thing, is a way to have individuals think about what they learned in a session, and we have a form in the peer-to-peer manual. It's something that you may want to use every time, and therefore it's standardized. Just have people think about the one big thing they learned today and how they're going to put it in action, and on the date that they're going to put it in action. And a similar exercise is called head, heart, and feet. So it's a piece of paper, and it has an image of a head, heart, and a couple feet. And you ask people, what struck you today? What did you learn? That's the head. Heart, what moved you? And then thirdly, what are you going to do about it? So those are some of the things that you can use as standard exercises. And that might be all. I think I've given you this is one more. The group projects. We have a lot of information in the peer-to-peer manual about group projects, and of course something may come up during discussions during that group process. Some of the activities, some sample activities are down below. I think a lot of foster youth are really concerned about their younger cohorts, about how to provide support and how to help young people not feel the pain that they felt going through the system. So I think a lot of young people will develop projects that will focus on either current or former foster youth, and then mental health, first aid training, and so forth. And I think that's the Cliff Notes.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Wonderful. So yeah, the peer-to-peer, as you can see, you can use it lots of different ways, just like the other curricula, and it tries to get more at really empowering the youth to support each other, maybe to do a group project that contributes to the foster care community overall, et cetera. So thanks, Jerry, for all that great insight, and we hope some of you undertake that piece of it. Just wanted to say a couple quick words about the coordinator toolkit. I'm actually not going to say very much. This is just a table of contents for it, so it gives you an idea of what's in it. Again, it's just an additional set of resources and materials for you, so that if you find yourself on day 3 of implementing one of these curricula and you're running into issues or you're not sure how to refer, this is a great place to look for all that kind of support. And so that is the 5th and last component of the curriculum. So I think we've given you a pretty good overview. We wanted to say a couple words about where you can go if you are interested in implementing this and you haven't done it yet. I know that Jerry and I are both very happy to just answer basic questions, et cetera. Jerry already put his email into the chat box, and I'll do the same in just a minute. Sorry, I'm not good at typing and talking at the same time. So, we're certainly happy to answer questions. Colleen has indicated that the foundation is willing to give at least some level of technical assistance. If you really wanted like an in-depth TOT, let's say you were going to deliver this yourself and you don't feel very experienced in these areas, that would be something that we could contract privately for. And I think there may be some other technical assistance funds available. We had a couple of thoughts. There are these technical assistance pots of money that sometimes allow us to do anywhere between 10 and 30 hours of time with you. So depending on the program and if we have a side conversation, there might be some additional technical assistance available. So if you're interested in any of that, I would say either talk to Colleen from the foundation or talk to Jerry or I, and we'll try to find out what your needs are and see how we can support you. Colleen, if you're back, I think it said you were. If you have anything to add about assistance and resources for implementing, that would be a great time.
Hi there. Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry I got disconnected just for a few moments. I think, so the CalMHSA grant in general, when that has resourced all of the TOT activity and this entire project, is coming to an end as we know it, because it was only meant to be one-time funding. It was never meant to be ongoing funding. And what I would offer is anyone on the phone who's interested. So, Dusty-Ann, you've laid out some options. I think anyone who's interested in talking to us about the materials and about how we know that colleges have implemented is one way of getting a little bit of support. And we also would like to, the idea of possibly, because resources are limited, possibly pairing colleges with a college that has already implemented, So there could be some sort of peer-to-peer guidance provided, depending on what kind of training infrastructure you all have at your campuses. So those are two sort of non-resource intensive ways to learn more about implementing this. And then I wanted just to come back real quick to the cookbook, because I know I was not on the line. Yeah. We were talking about the cookbook, but I did talk with Stacy Zaville, and CYC did finish their hard copy of their cookbook, and we've agreed to purchase a pretty bulk order of those. So we will be making those available to people that are interested as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great. Okay. So big question is, do we have Sherry on the call? You might need to hit *6 and unmute yourself. Sherry from Woodland College, was she able to join us?
I'm on here. Can you hear me?
I can. Welcome,
yes.
Sherry. Nice to hear your voice. Yay.
Hit *6.
Yay. Good. So I'm going to switch slides. So this is Sherry Schroeder from the foster care program at Woodland Community College. And so she's actually implemented the curriculum. And so we had asked her to kind of answer some of these questions. And we originally hoped we were going to have a panel, but a couple of the other sites weren't available. So I think what that means, Sherry, is that you can really just kind of take these questions however you like, and people can see the questions so they know what we've asked you. So if you just want to kind of speak off the cuff and tell us whatever you have to say, and maybe I'll follow up if I have any additional questions, that would be great.
That'd be great. And I'd love you if you went back to actually the picture of my daughter, my foster daughter, holding up the picture. And I'll just start from the top. And I was glad that I got to listen in. So I wanted to start from the beginning. So we've been doing this curriculum for 2 years, and really, like everybody else, didn't quite know how we were going to put the pieces together. And we, in Yolo County, have a monthly, what we call an ILP, or the Independent Living Transitional Age Foster Youth Task Force. So we meet with all of our county partners, and it was somewhat exciting because as we met together, we there wasn't just one of us that decided to implement this. It's the team, kind of the team approach. And so we have done it by the book, and then we also made it ours. And we did both a Friday night. We do a Friday night teen circle, which is somewhat what you call your peer-to-peer. So we already had that somewhat in place, and we just morphed it over a little bit. And I love it. You call it the good and the bad. We call it the high and the lows. So we start every one of our classes with a check-in and a high and a low. So it's a lot yours, but we've made it ours at the same time. And our instructors really, and we've done the Friday night kind of peer-to-peer teen circle, where we actually, ours is more than 45 minutes because we start at 6 in the evening and we do a dinner. We always have pizza, and people bring a few other things. So we actually get to talk for a little bit. We do it in a more circle setting, and then we would stop and do some sort of interactive art project that went along with whatever the topic was at hand that evening. And then we had a few other pots of money, and so we decided to do what we call training seminar weekends, where we actually have one coming tomorrow. We start Friday night, and tomorrow night we're taking up about 16 or 17. It's all females of that transitional age and several adults as well. And we've done it over a weekend seminar. So we've kind of done it in every single way that you described, and then we just put it all together, and it made it lovely. And our instructors, it's myself, and I feel like I've been around forever, so I have a master's degree in child development and my mental health endorsement. And then I have a marriage family therapist that has done a lot of attachment work and works with a lot of foster youth and caregivers, an art therapist, a recreation therapist. Then part of our ILP kind of task force, we have the Guardian Scholar program out of UC Davis. And then we have a CASA program that has some AmeriCorps former foster youth volunteers. So when you put us all together, we kind of are amazing. I feel like we do this very creative, therapeutic, welcoming environment. And so that's kind of how we've done it. So we've done your basic peer-to-peer, your weekend ongoing, and then we just used the book and kind of started from the beginning and tried to work our way through. So you saw some of we've done our Tree That Is Me in a couple of different ways, and our art therapist and our therapists have done that together, and we just do a lot of talking about it. Starts with a guided meditation and a guided fantasy and how you feel your roots and how important that is in our beginnings. and then our core, and then where, our strengths and where we want to go out into the world with. And you can see some of those pictures, and it's been astounding, and the youth all share that out, and just been beyond what we ever thought that would be. We've done the hero's journey, and we've done it past, present, future, and we do a lot of collaging with that, and then we actually did some kind of National Geographic where we got a lot of pictures, and you could choose pictures to put that somewhat together, and then we journaled with that, and kind of at the end we took that 5 steps to wellness, and everybody focused on their strengths. I'm always a strength-based first. Really focus on what you feel like your strengths are, and then a particular area that you wanted to work on, and push that through. So it's just been, I love the book for inspiration, and then we've just really tried to make it as rich and as deep and as thoughtful, and it's become actually far more than we thought it was going to be, and it's actually taken on a life of its own over here in Yolo County. I feel like we've done far more than what we contracted to do, but there's a lot of encouragement by the youth themselves to keep on keeping on, because they love meeting and they love that camaraderie, and I think that peer-to-peer support. We've been starting to do small dinners where we're taking 3, 4, 5 at the most at a time, and 3 of the adults, kind of the therapeutic component off the top, and going to dinner and doing more direct peer-on-peer after maybe we'll have met for an hour and then go and just do it in a more informal setting. So that's kind of what I wrote from my notes to myself.
Yeah, wonderful.
This is Colleen. I just need to say Sherry and her group up at Woodland College have done an exceptional above and beyond job with the curriculum, and we're just really very pleased to have you as a program partner.
Well, and now, of course, we're in love with it all, and you keep saying it's one-year funding. Nevertheless, I do think, I really love what you said. I think that doing the art, and we even brought in a woman that does clay. So and we did a lot of research around therapeutic clay, and and that kind of came right after talking about healthy relationships. And we've actually got, our county I have to be so proud of Yolo County. So we have 5 what they call TAY, transitional age youth social workers, and the county has actually given me the TAY workers to help lead some of the classes. So they have done one on, we kind of call it the good, the bad, and the ugly, about healthy relationships and then unhealthy relationships, drug use, and kind of incorporated some of those components into the 5, steps to wellness, and just really about being well all the way around it, and financial literacy is a little piece of that. And it's really been astounding. And I really do have to thank Colleen and the foundation for encouraging us to do more than we probably would have set out to do here. But it's been amazing. And I was with the youth yesterday, and I'm kind of coordinating this whole weekend adventure up the hill, and I always think no one's going to want to go, and now it's almost like we're beyond our capacity, and they just want to keep coming back for more. It's really, really good stuff. So thank you for putting it together.
Yeah, and I would note, Sherry has really been a champion of this, as have other implementers. We've had approximately 23 colleges implement this material, and out of all of the foster youth-oriented materials that we've put out to the colleges, or that we've encouraged the colleges in some way, supported them to facilitate at the colleges, this has been the most well-received, and we've gotten the most positive and robust feedback directly from the youth about the materials and about their experience. So it's very, very gratifying. I know that learning a budget and learning, how to develop a strong education plan is really important, but this particular material has really, really reached deeply into our community of youth, and it's just very exciting for me personally to be a part of a project where the youth are sending incredible testimonial back to say thank you, thank you so much for finally giving me a forum, allowing for a forum where I can go in a safe way to a place that I really need to go to in order to be functional in my life.
And I think just to kind of piggyback on that, I think a lot of people, we didn't know how best to do this, so we did some classes on Wednesday afternoons after school, and that's pretty well, but our biggest success has been Friday nights, which is what nobody thought would work. But do not have school the following day. They can get there. A lot of them are coming on bus passes. They don't have the resources necessarily to get places the way that other people do. And I think it was the gentleman that was talking about the balance of curriculum. I wrote down the balance of caring and sharing. So I do think the balance of caring about the curriculum, but also allowing ample time for youth to share. And I have to tell you, I pick up kids, because I have my own child that went to every single class forever, and now I pick up a strand of youth on my way in. And on the way over in the car, they're talking about their highs and the lows of the week. They know it's coming up, so they actually will recap their week, and then it's just. And I think the other part we've learned is that we do some check-ins with our youth just by, are you able to come to class? Do you need a ride? And we've had several of them just say, I can't believe you care about me, that you called me, you're calling and checking on me. And we would perhaps not know about that, or something was going on other than that check-in from the high and the low of the week. And we did it a little bit like Teen Circle or the Girl Circle curriculum, where you start with your curriculum very generic and then make it a little more specific, and allowing every single youth to have a voice at that circle. Rather than sitting at tables that you sit in a circle and look at each other, it's much more personable. So I feel like lots of magic.
Wonderful. Well, it is so gratifying to hear for us who developed it that it's going well out there. Thank you so much, Sherry, for all of those insights. And I saw a couple of questions in the chat box already, but before I go to the ones in the chat box, so we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left at the most here, although I know Jerry and I are happy to stay on a little longer if you have more technical questions. But does anybody have any questions specifically for Sherry, who's been implementing, before we keep her on too long? Now is a good time. You can either type them into the chat or you can unmute yourself. Anybody have anything they want to know from Sherry or from Colleen? While people are thinking, Colleen, there was one question. Brandy was asking whether anyone in Santa Clara County community colleges are implementing the curriculum. She's looking for folks in her area.
I have to go back to my list. I think we did have a non-Yes ILP college in that area, and I will follow up. I know there's something at San Juan Delta where they had a real robust program. I want to make sure that we pair people where they had great success with the curriculum. So, Brandy, I will follow up with you. I'll have access to everybody's email. Hopefully, because you're all going to send in a request asking for the materials to let you know if there's a good college. So for many of you have been emailing me. For anyone who's interested in possibly being matched with a mentor college, and I can't promise that that college will have capacity to do so, but anyone who's interested, I will look down our directory of those who have implemented, and I will try to do a virtual introduction between you and a potential mentor college.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pam had a question earlier. She was asking how we feel about offering this program to any and all transitioning youth, not just foster. I think quite a lot of it is applicable to all youth who are transitioning. You would just, of course, have to be careful about some of the pieces that specifically talk about foster youth or talk about coming out of foster care, so you'd want to either alter or delete those pieces. So you'd probably have to customize just a little bit more if it's not for foster youth, but certainly, I mean, some of the external source materials we used were not foster care specific. Those are just resources that are out there for youth in general. And like we said at the beginning, these are basic life skills that everyone should really be learning, and lots of kids come out of traditional families without some of these skills. So absolutely feel free to, really, we're hoping that you'll use these curricula in any way that is useful to you. You could, you know, if you don't have funding to actually do the whole program, you could always just pull materials from this for some of your other classes, you know, with the caveat of being careful what can of worms you sort of are opening. But that was the idea, is that we didn't know if the funding was going to go forever as far as having your own pot of money to deliver this, but the materials are just usable in so many ways that we hoped that they would. They're just usable in so many ways that we hoped that they would be useful over time with or without the continued funding. So absolutely, please feel free to use them just the way you imagine. Any other questions? What I think I would like to do is sort of formally close. I wanted to check real quick if anybody, if Amy from CARS or Colleen, if you have any final words you want to say, if anybody, any of the other conveners. Jerry, did you have anything to add? Anybody from our official group have anything left to say?
I think I'm just typing in the chat box, but I was just going to indicate that we will follow up with all of the participants to see if there happens to be a nearby implementer that might be willing to do a mentoring or a, just sort of here's how we did it and this is what worked and this is what didn't.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Jerry and I are very happy to answer any questions you have. Obviously, if it gets into doing a full training of trainers, we'd have to work out some resources for that, but we're always available for sure. Any of the other conveners have anything to add? Okay, well then what I think we should do, since it's 3:30, is say that sort of the official part of the webinar is ending now, and I want to ask you all, when you go to exit the session, it's going to ask you to fill out an evaluation, and we really appreciate if folks fill that out. It's of course important to our funding, but it's also, we hope to deliver this again in the future, and we really do make a lot of changes to our presentations based on the feedback we get, so we'll take those feedback very seriously. And like I said, we're happy to stay on a few more minutes. I know some of you are hoping to actually implement this and thinking about it. So if you have technical questions now, we'll stay on for another 5 or 10 and see if anybody needs us. Does anybody have anything left to add before we jump off? All right, well, we want to thank you all so much for taking time out of your very busy day to learn about this curriculum. We hope it becomes a great resource for all of you, just like it has for the sites who have already used it, and we're just so pleased to hear that it's out there and doing some good. So thanks everyone for all the wonderful work that you do with youth.